Okay. As part of our video spotlight series for the Georgetown Africa Business Conference, we are highlighting various moguls on the continent. Today, we are here with Miss Christabel Dadzie. She is the CEO and founder of Ahaspora and has a lot of experience working for the World Bank. Ahaspora provides young Ghanaian professionals who have returned or are thinking about returning home with a support system to help them positively impact their country as an individual or as a group. Thank you so much for being here, Ms. Dadzie.
Thank you so much. For having me. It's a pleasure.
The pleasure is all ours. So can you tell us a little bit about what inspired you to start Ahaspora? And along the 10 years since inception, what has been some of your greatest learnings in managing a nonprofit?
Great, thank you so much. So I actually love telling the story because it's a story I live, essentially. Ahaspora started as a dream, literally, on a plane. 10 years ago, actually 11 years ago now, when I was returning to Ghana from the US after staying for about 13 years, I made the decision to move back home. And as I was on the plane, I literally dreamt that we were all going back home, like every one of the 100 people, whatever on the Delta flight were coming back home to make a difference. But truth be told, I wake up and I'm the only person I know to be doing what I'm doing. Fast forward to coming home, settling in, I found two things. First is that I was naturally hanging out with people who also came from abroad because we have things in common, because we share problems, because we complain the same way, because we're not so open-minded and all of that. And then I also found out that there was a lot of us versus them. And this actually came through my writing about my story. I used to write in what we call Facebook notes. And our topic is the good, the bad, the ugly. And I'll tell real stories that were happening to me in the return. And I had extremely positive feedback from people who had been abroad to my writing and extremely negative feedback for people who were home and hadn't left. And so very quickly, I started seeing two things. Thing number one, we need support. Going back to see my brother who had been home at that point, maybe 7 years prior to me, and he had a support system. He reconnected with some high school best friends of his. They formed an amazing tech company, and through the struggles, they were doing well, right? And then looking at my big sister who came from the UK, didn't really find that niche and left. I realized that there was a need for support. That coupled with all the complaints that we were making with the people around me who had also come back home. So that was one. Then the other thing that I also found was there was a need for a bridge between those of us who had left and those of us who hadn't, because it was essential for us to realize that we all have an opportunity and a mandate, so to speak, to give back to our country from the different perspectives that we had. And we all have something to learn from each other. So it was with these two things that I invited over a group of friends, 11 of us plus me, 12, to my mom's house over lunch. And I always tell people lunch is key, food works.
For sure.
And discuss the idea of Ahaspora, an idea of forming some sort of organization for us to support each other, for us to turn our complaints into solutions together. They really liked the idea. I give credit to my mother for the name Ahaspora because it was the nickname that she gave me when I came back. Aha, which is the Cree word for here, and then spora, which is a stem of diaspora. So that depicts who we are here from the diaspora. My friends loved the name, we adopted it, and we decided that we'll create an organic organization, kind of let it figure itself out. So very quickly, we leveraged technology and created a listserv. And the idea of the listserv was very simple. Ask any question under the sun and the community will respond. We've grown from 11 people in 2011 to over 3,000 people in 2022 who are all navigating, either to come back home, thinking about the return, or are affiliated, interested, and like-minded who have actually never left, who will help us. But one thing I can tell you is today, every question has been answered except for one. which I'm still telling people that that's a business opportunity. And it's kind of a fun, silly one, which is that people have asked, where can I rent a tuxedo in Accra? And we still don't have an answer.
That is a business opportunity.
Absolutely. But aside that, folks have found jobs, they found housing. We create opportunities for them to speak with government entities on registering businesses, on accessing capital. We've partnered with organizations in Ghana who can help us all navigate, the system and settle down well. To top that off, one of the things that I am particularly passionate about and found that a lot of people are is giving back. And so the idea was that if we're going to give you help to settle down, then you're also going to have to give back to the society in one way or another. And we found that a lot of people wanted to give back, just didn't know how. So as a group, we decided to create a flagship mentoring program, kind of a big sister, big brother kind of program, where we can give back to high schoolers in Ghana, career development, professional development, personal development. So not academics, but more so the things around academics that make you a stellar individual and a better employee or employer. And so since 2013, we've been having a mentoring program, which has now actually blown up into other organizations, having us support them on the mentoring journey. So that's really the sum of Ahaspora over the last 10 years. And really, very lastly, is something that we didn't necessarily define, but fell on our laps, which is that up until, I would say maybe a couple years ago, we've been the only organization that is, on diaspora relations, but located in Ghana. Majority of the diaspora organizations are wherever they are in the diaspora, but we kind of understand the diaspora, but we've moved home. And so what that did was it naturally had us being called by governments, for example, to review the diaspora engagement policy, to give stakeholder engagement on that, and other policies like that. So we've also kind of become this niche organization, the go-to for when you want to discuss things about diaspora relations or returnee issues as well.
That's awesome. I really love the idea of not just returning and leveraging the resources at Ahaspora, but definitely paying it forward to the community. Love that. So thanks for sharing so much about that. So for those in the diaspora, like me, and I'm sure many of those at the conference who are uncertain about the pathways to return home, just like you mentioned on that Delta flight, you were thinking, this is me coming home, but everybody else, what will they be doing? They may think it's too risky, or they may have put it off for a while. Do you have any advice to help assuage some of these fears and mitigate the risk that they perceive of moving back home?
I do, actually. One of the things that we are working on, we haven't gotten as much out there as we'd like to, but over time we will, is a project that I call Ahasporans of Africa. And what this does actually is it's a short video, about 3 to 5 minutes of an Ahasporan. When I say Ahasporan, it's a returnee, basically, who has come home and tells their story, where they were before, what they're doing now, but most importantly, gives tips to others who are coming. And the goal of that is for us to tell our stories, because we're doing a lot of amazing things as we've come back. You have people who were laid off during the economic crisis in the US on Wall Street, who are now here running the telcos in Ghana. That opportunity wouldn't have come, for example, if you stayed in the US. So that we're all seeing that for the most part, there's this large opportunity to make a difference in the corporate world, in the international development space like I am in the private sector space, in government. We have returnees who are running the show in government, really bringing that global experience and efficiencies. And so that's one way that we're hoping people can go check it out. Our website is www.ahaspora.com. Take a look at those and kind of get inspired. But personally, what I tell people all the time is, if you're going to make the journey, do it because you have a reason to do it, right? I made my journey because when I was leaving the US, it was always to go gather experience, work, school, and then at some point, I needed to come and give back to my country. As to whether I did that as a one-way trip or I did that multiple times, that didn't matter, but there was always this cause for me to come and give back, right? And so that was my mission, my personal mission. Because it was a personal mission, when I went through the roller coaster that it is in this side of the world, when you pay your bills and things will still not work. When you have roads that are just not tarred for no reason, but you think of, driving along Maryland and just being able to have that smooth life, but you still get up and come. When those issues come up, you will stay because you know why you're here. Now, if you do it because it's now the big thing to do, the next best thing, Africa is open for business. Africa is the next frontier for God knows what, the green gold and all of that, which is all very true. But if you do it because somebody did it and you think that's the coolest thing to do, you may be mistaken. So it's always important to have some introspection. Is this for me? And if it's for you, come. What I've grown to learn over the years, and it's actually funny because I tell the story slightly differently than I would when I came 5 years on than I do now. Now that I've actually come back twice, and there always could be a third time, is it may not be for you, but if it's not for you, still make sure you're contributing somehow. So find an organization like ours. We're a nonprofit. We're not making money. We're just, going along because this is something important to do, and support the organization. Find an orphanage and give back. Find a business and support the small business in scaling up, because those connections still make you a part of the development movement. And to me, that is what is most important, is that we're giving back in person for those of us who can, but indirectly for those of you who cannot.
Yeah, that's really great advice. I took some insights from there as well. And it actually leads me to my question around pitfalls for returnees that you've seen. You've seen many returnees probably leverage resources at Ahaspora, and you've also seen some make really terrible mistakes because they may have not known what they were getting themselves into, et cetera, or never had the guidance. What are some of the common pitfalls you've seen returnees do, and what advice do you have to prevent those from occurring when they're coming back home?
The biggest one, which is very general, but so true, is when you come and you believe you can save the world being wherever you go.
Savior complex, love it.
Absolutely. Everybody needs to come with an open mind. First of all, acknowledging that there's been people here before you. The country didn't break down before you came, or the continent, wherever it is you're going. And when you leave, it will be just fine. And I actually think we should approach life in general. But particularly here, because if you don't do that, then you have the system fight you naturally, right? Because you came and you want to bulldoze your way through everything. So I think it's important that people always come in with an open mind. It's important that you turn your complaints into solutions. Returnees are kind of annoying because all we do is complain, and so, which is fine because that's how you get things fixed. But I think the complaint shouldn't end with complaints. Now you're complaining, what are you going to bring to the table differently? What are you going to do differently? Another one is that we settle and then we just join the crew. If you can't beat them, join them. So
true.
So then we also start going to meetings 2 hours late and all of that. And that's a problem too, because then you just become a part of the problem. So it's always important. I tell people, and I'm actually serious, that a lot of the times I travel a lot and I just by nature use travel to kind of regroup and recharge. And so when I find myself heading towards the part where I don't care anymore, I leave and then I come right back. And I come back with an appreciation for my country again, and then I keep going. So again, come with an open mind. Don't believe that you are the solution, because you're not. You are a part of the solution. And so you can't do everything, because that's the other thing. People get really burnt out quickly. Right. I'll just give you a very practical example of something I noticed when I came on and I wrote about, which was very quickly, I started questioning whether I had become a lazy person or somehow I was not being as productive as I was in the US. And so I started doing introspection and analysis, which I do all the time. And I realized that the issue was two things: traffic and heat. Right? So if you don't have a driver and you have a car, you're going to spend quite a bit of time driving. True. By the time you're done driving, you're tired. It's just natural, right? The other one is the all year round heat and different levels, but it's hot. That saps your energy. And if you're not careful, you will ignore these very, very simple things and you just keep pushing till you break. When I figured that out on the traffic side of things, I told myself, you know what? Because I can't afford to get a driver, what I'm going to do is I'm going to play something in the car, be it good music, be it a podcast, be it something. I'm going to use that time productively because there is nothing I can do but sit in the traffic. On the heat, I started hydrating better. You know, this sounds really tiny, but it's these kind of real fun facts that will help you breathe. You know, and then the last thing in that bit was, because I work with people in different countries and in the Western world, I started communicating to them to understand. I may not always be able to put in my 12, 15 hours that I used to back in the US. There's some days where I'm just gonna maybe start my day and have to take a break because that's what it is, you know? So, or I'm gonna spend so many hours in meetings because we got there late that I may not be back at my desk. So the other key is communicating those differences. And it's not because we're bad, it's because it's a different culture. And I think that's also important for people to understand, that it's not necessarily, people like to think of it that, you know, Africans are this, Ghanaians are that. No, think about it. When I went to the US, I had to adapt to that culture. I had to start speaking faster because I was told, I cannot hear you. You remember this?
Oh, yes, many times.
First of all, I don't understand why when you shout, you hear me. I don't get it.
Makes no sense.
I just don't. But guess what? When I got it 2-3 times, what did I do? I started learning how to talk faster so that people will hear me. So we also adapt to that culture. When you're coming, be open-minded to adapt to this culture, and you do very well.
Yeah, I think that's such a good point, because when people think about coming home, they have this perception that home is home. I should not have to adapt to coming home. But it's really re-engineering your mind to say you've been gone for a while, and yes, home is home, but readapting and re-assimilating is very important, and it takes patience, and it takes doing little simple things like you mentioned. So really appreciate that advice. So at the conference, we have aspiring social entrepreneurs and nonprofit founders who want to come back on the continent, not be a savior, but want to solve one problem that is very passionate for them, like one problem that is something that they want to solve on the continent. Do you have any advice on how to make that passion or cause a reality?
Absolutely. I mean, if you're interested in something, if you're passionate about it, like I'm passionate about certain things, just do it. You have to start from somewhere. It's not going to be rosy. It's not going to wait for you. Pick that activity. One of the things I love about moving back home, I tell the story of a little girl who would not have gone to school had I not had 160 cities at the time to pay for her fees for one semester or one term. So it's 3 terms, right? So in a year, it would have been 160 times 3. That was it. And this little girl would never have entered a classroom because she's from a poor family, and they would pick the boy over her. And that was it. That's all they could afford. With 160 CDs a term times 3, I was able to change somebody's life. Take that for inspiration. I'm not sure I could have done that in the US. In the US, I'm yet another Black African girl who, is smart and is going about her duties every day, just like anybody else. In Ghana, I get the opportunity to shine and change lives in a way that I couldn't do in the US. And for most people looking to be social entrepreneurs and take on social entrepreneurial journeys and nonprofit organizations, that's what we live for, is that impact we can see. Everything I do, I'm a very graphic person. I need to be able to see it. So be it, what I'm doing in Ahaspora and showing up at a happy hour we've organized, and somebody tells me, Christabel, I was leaving until I met this group, chatting with 3-4 people whose journey is exactly the same as mine. I decided, you know what, yes, we can. And we partnered together, and here we are. Or if I flip to my job on the World Bank, working in social protection with the most vulnerable people, watching a woman who lives in northern Ghana who is telling me we changed her life. Today, she has a grocery store because we gave her a skill and a cash grant, small cash grant, really little, $200. And because of that, she was able to improve that skill and open a shop in her community, and tells me she has a voice today at the community meetings because she is seen as an important person. Those are the things I live for. And those are the things you can do, I would say, and there's many more opportunities because we're still developing. So people looking to make a change, trust me, this is the place to make the change. So many opportunities to do it. To hire a young person, you know, in your business, in your entrepreneurial business, and change their lives by changing their mindsets, by improving how they think, by making them leaders. All of that is amazing.
Awesome. I think one of the things I'm taking away from this is, you know, you don't have to think about a big enterprise to be a social enterprise. It just starts from that one next individual down the street, and impacting their lives may inspire you to even create different ways of impact. It doesn't necessarily even have to be creating a big nonprofit to deal with causes you're passionate about. Love that. So on my last question, which is a fun one, what is the future for Ahaspora for the next 5 to 10 years? What are your goals for Ahaspora?
Excellent question. For 10 years, excuse me, for 10 years, we've supported essentially Guineans coming back home with that transition, mostly very informally. And then it kind of turned into this big thing that I didn't even expect. What we want to do now is to be intentional about, this support. So a lot of what we're doing is formalizing things. We're working on creating a buddy system, for example, where we can pair up Guineans who are home with Guineans who are looking to do the return so that they can, within the same industry, so that they can start having discussions about potential partnerships. We're looking within the nonprofit sector for more people to bunch up with, the EUs, the GIZs, different big organizations that are looking for people like you and I who speak the local language and yet understand the global system to come back and support in whatever ventures they're doing. And so we're actually starting with a conference right after yours, a week later. Ghana Action will be in March on the 3rd and the 4th. And we're using that forum to start having some of those discussions, but more importantly, to create actions that we'll be using to track our progress over the year. And not forgetting, our mentoring program is a thing. It's not going anywhere. Whatever we do, we're going to make sure that we can infuse the knowledge we have into younger people in Ghana and then see how they grow and inspire us as well.
That's awesome. You have a bright future ahead of you. And so I'm very excited to have had this conversation. Hopefully it inspires the audience to know that they should have no fear in coming back home. Ahaspora is there to support for sure. But also, making a difference is also quite important. And so bringing themselves and really getting a taste of the countries that they're returning to and making a difference every day is an inspiration in itself to stay. So thank you so much, Ms. Dadzie. This has been an incredible discussion, and we thank you so much for your time.
Thank you so much for having me.